Thank you. It is great to be with you and see this large crowd, and we'd like to have a bigger crowd next year. We are going to have one next year because we know that you're facing tremendous challenges in numbers of cases, and we want to improve the situation. Thank you, James, so much for your introduction and your superb leadership throughout your career at the Department of Justice, Main Justice, and here now at ER. He's doing a fantastic job. He understands the issues, knows what our challenges are, working steadfastly every day with good judgment and poise and keeping a cool head under any kind of stress. I'm really impressed with his work, and if you haven't gotten to know him, you'll feel the same as you do get to know him. So thank you also to Catherine Riley and Kate Sheehy and Chris Santoro, David So, David Neal, Chief Judge Keller, Lisa Ward, Gene King, Robin Suitman, and all of the leadership team. It's good to be with you today. Each one of you plays an important role in the administration of our immigration laws. Immigration judges are critical to ensuring that the Department of Justice carries out its responsibilities under the INA, the law of the United States. You have an obligation to decide cases efficiently and to keep our federal laws functioning effectively, fairly, and consistently. As the statute states, immigration judges conduct designated proceedings subject to such supervision and shall perform such duties as the Attorney General shall prescribe. This responsibility seeks to ensure that our immigration system operates in a manner that is consistent with the laws enacted by Congress. So as you know, the INA was established to ensure a rational, consistent system of immigration to promote the national interest, at least as Congress found it. Of course, there are provisions in the INA, in consent decrees, regulations, court decisions, where the common sense enforceability of the plain intent of the INA has been made more difficult, and that's what you have to wrestle with virtually every day. President Trump, I think, is correct. Congress does need to close some loopholes and clarify matters. Without congressional action, clarity and consistency for us in your daily work will be difficult. But let's be clear, we have a goal. And that goal is to end the lawlessness that now exists in our immigration system. This Department of Justice is committed to using every available resource to achieve that goal. We will act strategically with our colleagues at DHS and across the government, and we will not hesitate to redeploy resources and alter policies to meet new challenges as they arise, and they always do. Last month, the Department of Homeland Security announced that it will begin to refer as close to 100% of illegal southwest border crossers as possible to the Department of Justice for prosecution, and the Department of Justice will take up those cases. I have put in place a zero-tolerance policy for illegal entry on our southwest border. If you cross the southwest border unlawfully, then we will prosecute you. It's that simple. If someone is smuggling illegal aliens across our southwest border, then we will prosecute, period. I've sent 35 prosecutors to the southwest and moved 18 immigration judges to detention centers near the border. That is about a 50% increase in the number of immigration judges who will be handling the cases at the border. All of us should agree that by definition, our goal should be to have zero illegal immigration. That's what we want. We want not to arrest people, not to have to process people. We want people to come lawfully and only lawfully. Each of us is a part of the executive branch, and it is our duty to, quote, take care that the laws are faithfully executed. Ours is a public trust, a responsibility. And the United States of America is not some idea. It's not just a landmass or an economy. Ours is a sovereign nation state with a constitution, laws, elections, borders. And as you all well know, one of our major difficulties today is the asylum process. The asylum system is being abused to the detriment of the rule of law, sound public policy, public safety even, and to the detriment of people with just claims to asylum. Saying a few simple words, claiming a fear of return, is now transforming a straightforward arrest for illegal entry and immediate return into a prolonged legal process where an alien may be released from custody into the United States and possibly never show up for an immigration hearing. This is in large part what has been accurately called catch and release. Beginning in 2009, more and more aliens who passed an initial USCIS credible fear review were released from custody into the United States pending a full hearing. Powerful incentives were created for aliens to come here illegally and claim fear of return. In effect, word spread that by asserting this fear, they could remain in the United States one way or the other, and far too often that rumor proved correct. The results are just what one would expect. The number of illegal entrants has surged, credible fear claims have skyrocketed, and the percentage of asylum claims found to be meritorious by our judges has declined significantly. That's because the vast majority of the current asylum claims we're seeing are not valid, and you're not finding them valid. For the last 5 years, only 20% of claims have been found to be meritorious after a hearing before an immigration judge. In addition, some 15% are found invalid by USCIS as part of their initial review. Further illustrating this point, it's amazing, really. In 2009, DHS conducted more than 5,000 credible fear reviews. By 2016, only 7 years later, that number had increased to 94,000. The number of these aliens placed in immigration court proceedings went from fewer than 4,000 to more than 73,000 by 2016, a 19-fold increase, overwhelming the system and leaving legitimate claims buried. Now we all know that many of those crossing the border illegally are leaving difficult, even dangerous conditions, and we understand that all are due proper respect in court and the proper legal process. But we cannot abandon legal discipline and sound legal concepts. Under the INA, asylum is available for those who leave their home country because of persecution or fear on account of race, religion, nationality, or membership in a particular social group or political opinion. Asylum was never meant to alleviate all problems, even all serious problems that people face every day all over the world. So today I'm exercising the responsibility given to me under the INA, and I will be issuing a decision that restores sound principles of asylum and long-standing principles of immigration law. We have not acted hastily, but carefully. In my judgment, this will be a correct interpretation of the law. It advances the original intent and purpose of the INA, and it will be your duty, of course, to carry that out. This decision will provide more clarity for you. It will help you to rule consistently, and all our judges to rule consistently throughout the country and fairly. The fact is we have a backlog of about 700,000 immigration cases, and it's still growing. We thought we could get those numbers down, but they're not going down yet. That's one of the things that we're going to work on. It's not acceptable. We cannot allow it to continue. At this time, when our immigration system and our immigration judges are under great stress, I'm calling on you to use your best efforts and proper policies to enhance our effectiveness, to end the lawlessness, and move to the virtuous cycle. We have to be very productive. Volume is critical. It just is. We have to ask you to evaluate your processes and disposition rates. We ask each one of you to complete at least 700 cases a year. That's about average. We're all accountable, of course. Setting this expectation is a rational management policy, I believe, to ensure consistency, accountability, and efficiency in our immigration system. And there'll be difficulties, and rules won't apply to everybody in every circumstance. But thank you for working every day to meet and even exceed this goal. You can be sure this Department of Justice and this administration supports you in your critically important and historic effort. That's why we are hiring more than 100 new immigration judges this calendar year. And we are actively working with our partners at DHS to ensure that we can deploy judges electronically and by video teleconference where needed, and to obtain appropriate courtroom facilities. Let's be clear, these actions, I say this to critics sometimes, they need to think about this, these actions will not end or reduce legal immigration. These actions will be directed at reducing illegal immigration. Only Congress can change the policies for legal immigration. So we've got a great nation, the greatest, I think, in the history of the world. It's no surprise that people want to come here, but they must do so according to law, and they must do so in numbers that are justified and in the national interest of the United States. So when we lose clarity or have decisions that hold out hope where a fair reading of the law gives none, we have cruelly hurt many people. As we resolutely strive to consistently and fairly enforce the law, we will be doing the right thing. Clarity in law is the right thing. The world will know what our rules are, and great numbers will no longer undertake this dangerous journey. The number of illegal aliens and the number of baseless claims will fall. I'm confident that's true. A virtuous cycle will be created rather than the vicious cycle of expanding illegality. The American people have spoken. They've spoken in our laws that have been passed by Congress, and they have spoken in our elections. They want a safe, secure border and a lawful system of immigration that actually works and serves the national interest. Thank you for what you do. Let's deliver this for the American people. It's our responsibility. I know we can count on you. Let's do it in the right way, in a way that we can be proud of. And James, thank you again for your leadership. And I want to again thank each of you for the challenges you face every day right now. We want to assist you in making that job easier, more effective, and more productive for you so that you can fairly and effectively manage your caseload. Thank you all for allowing me to be with you. I am honored beyond words to serve as the Attorney General of the United States. This is a major national issue. You can be sure we're making progress now, and we're going to continue to make progress and serve the people of the United States of America as best we can. Thank you all, and God bless.
The third one we see out of our four models is when you're offered an opportunity, and modeling seems to be the one that we're seeing a lot of right now. I've got a modeling agency. I'm going to make you famous. You're beautiful. We can set you up with the best things. I'll fly you out to LA and we'll get started. And that person will probably never be seen again. A lot of young people don't realize how hard it is to get into the fame business, and they think that a free walk might be an easy route into something that could be a glamorous life, not realizing that it's a trap. And the last one we see a lot of is drug addictions. Whenever we see a severe, severe drug addiction, there's a very good likelihood that person is being exploited. It's very hard to have a job and to hold any sort of income source when you have a severe drug addiction. And as a result, traffickers prey on that. And they offer them a way to get free drugs in exchange for what the trafficker really wants is the exploitation of that person for money. So in answer to your question, there really is no gender or age that is more or not of one than the other. All genders, all ages, all people are being targeted. Really what we have to focus on is where are those vulnerabilities and how do we keep those people safe?
Thank you, Lisa. I'm going to turn the focus now to legislation. Ross, from my understanding, Florida has been fairly proactive when it comes to legislation on this trafficking. Can you share with us what we've accomplished so far and where you see this going?
Sure, absolutely. And so, yeah, I'm really excited to talk about what we've done in Florida because our response, it's not me, it's the entire body at the legislature, and it's good people like those that are sitting on this the dais this evening that have been engaged aggressively in the fight. But so in 2012, before we even got to the legislature, we passed what's referred to as the Safe Harbor Act, which essentially says that children cannot be complicit in prostitution. They're victims, they're not criminals. So we did that in 2012, and then when I got to the legislation in 2013, I was honored to sponsor a bill that I still to this day is the one that really is closest to my heart, but it's the bill that allows victims to petition the court to vacate or expunge a conviction if the conviction was the result of the fraud, the forced duress or coercion of the trafficker. So what we were finding is that victims were being rescued. They were trying to turn the page of their lives, so to speak, and move on, but they couldn't get into college or school, and they couldn't find jobs because they were convicted criminals. They were convicted felons because in the context of their trafficking scenario, they had been forced to engage in prostitution or forced to engage in drug trafficking, sell drugs for their pimp or the trafficker, and so they were being victimized a second time. You know, God forbid we would allow that to happen. And so that very first session, we passed that bill and it's signed into law, and now literally dozens and dozens, and I don't know what the number is right now, but literally dozens of victims have had their convictions vacated and have turned the page of their lives and are moving in the positive direction. So that's pretty neat. In 2014, we took another step. We had an omnibus comprehensive legislative package that increased penalties for traffickers. We made trafficking a life felony in Florida, which is a big deal. We increased penalties for pimping. We tried in 14 to increase penalties for solicitation because we knew that the demand side of trafficking is really just as important for us to address because the demand for the purchase of sex is what creates right the problem to begin with. But the following year we got that done. We've been able to pass legislation that protects the location of safe houses because what we were finding is that victims were actually tracking down what they considered to be their property or their chattel in the law, we call it. They actually perceived these victims as theirs, as their property. So they were going to safe houses and grabbing them and pulling them away. So we were able to, pursuant to a public records exemption, protect the location of those safe houses. That was big. We have been able to protect the identities of victims and law enforcement investigative records. We still need to take a step in that direction and protect the identity of those who've been arrested in the context of trafficking scenarios. So that's something we still need to do. We've actually made it against the law for children to work in adult establishments, which, if you can believe it, before the passage of that law, it was not illegal. We're requiring now adult establishments to confirm the age and the identity of individuals who are prospective employees or independent contractors before they go to work for an adult establishment. And this law now allows the state and law enforcement to, unannounced, go into the adult establishment and confirm that these records are being kept and confirm that these adult establishments are in fact following the law. we allowed prosecutors such as Ms. Haba to proceed under the RICO statute. If you're unfamiliar with RICO, it's a racketeering statute which gives prosecutors a tremendous amount of flexibility in terms of proving up and prosecuting a case involving a trafficking scenario that may involve different victims over a period of years in different cities, and it really is very effective in the prosecution of these cases. This is a big deal. We removed the statute of limitations for the prosecution of traffickers. That's huge because many victims don't even realize they're victims until years down the road, and by that time the existing statute of limitations would prevent prosecutors from going after them. So we removed that altogether. So now we can prosecute traffickers years into the future if that's necessary, if the facts warrant and can establish a conviction. Here's the last one I'll mention. We passed a bill that requires the posting of help hotline notices, signs at important locations around the state, at traffic rest areas, in hospital emergency rooms, in bus stations, in adult establishments, so that victims who are in those establishments have the ability to know where to go to get help and who to call. In terms of where we're headed, I'm optimistic that we'll be able to pass a bill that we weren't unfortunately able to get across the finish line these last 2 years, which allows victims to sue their traffickers for civil damages. And not only the traffickers, but those who would facilitate the trafficking. So persons who know or remain willfully blind as to the existence of trafficking would potentially be legally liable. I think that will ultimately allow not only victims to be compensated, right, for their actual losses and damages, but I think also it will create a scenario in which industries that bump up against trafficking, such as the hotel industry, will take steps not only to train their staff and their employees and implement protocols that will protect people, but also in those instances where they have knowledge of what's going on and do nothing about it, and don't notify law enforcement, or in fact they remain willfully blind to what's happening, then they would be liable. So that's something that needs to happen and take place. Again, I know there was a great deal of discouragement this past year when we got that bill to the House of both the floor and the Senate, and we just couldn't push it across the finish line. And we could probably talk for half an hour about all the stuff that happened with that. But keep in mind that sometimes it takes legislation a number of years before you do get it passed. And trust me, it's not going anywhere, and it will ultimately get passed.
Thank you, Ross. Lisa and audience, as you know, there's been a lot in the news with the shutdown of Backpage and Craigslist. Can you please expand more on this and tell us why SESTA and FOSTA was such an important legislation?
Absolutely. And I'm sure all of you who watch any news have heard about SESTA and FOSTA throughout the media channels as they have been moving through the legislature at the federal levels this past year. And just for those that don't know, SESTA stands for Stop Enabling Sex Traffickers Act of 2017, and FOSTA is the Fight Online Sex Trafficking Act of 2017. So what did these two acts say? In essence, you have to go back to the Communications Decency Act. And what this had, if anybody watched the Wolf of Wall Street movie, that movie was sort of, that real life event was sort of the origin of the Communication Decency Act existing. And what it basically says is that if you are hosting an online website and third-party individuals are posting on your website, you are not responsible for the content that they post. So that would go for reviews, that would go for things like Craigslist, where you might have third parties posting to sell things, to solicit, what have you. But that's not your responsibility. Now, granted, nothing is without any exceptions. So there are some exceptions in there where you would be expected to do some sort of monitoring of it. But ultimately, it was a federal immunity to liability if something like an ad for prostitution, for example, was being posted on your website. So what ended up happening is this sanctuary was created online where sex traffickers could use websites like Backpage and Craigslist and all sorts of forums to post ads and traffic children and adults on their websites. And so our Congress recognized the problem and they heard the voice of the people. And they heard that this was a huge problem. And what really came out is Backpage went to some congressional hearings, and through a substantial amount of investigation, through a number of lawsuits and the congressional hearings in combination, it came out that Backpage was a lot more sinister than just facilitating third-party people posting. Backpage was complicit. And there's ongoing legal things happening right now at the federal level, criminally and civilly, against Backpage. But right now, the model of Backpage was when you go on there, you can pay $10, post an ad, and the primary purpose of Backpage was posting ads focused on prostitution and the sale of human beings. Now, that whenever an individual went on Backpage initially, and they started posting ads that involved children, Backpage right off the bat was taking those down. But that was interfering with their market, and their customers didn't like it. And so some internal memos came out, and some of them were incredibly concerning. For example, one of them said that they ordered their people that they would be fired immediately if they ever acknowledged publicly that they knew the ads were about prostitution. They had to officially say they were about escorting only, so plausible deniability. They said that it became the official Backpage policy that when ads listed children or concerning words, that they were going to modify those ads so it didn't flag law enforcement. Plausible deniability, but yet children are still being exploited on their website, and they knew it. So if it said she's 13, they'd take the word 13 off. If there was a word that said very young, that would probably be eliminated too. The ad wouldn't be taken down, but the flag to law enforcement would be. There was they posted a lot about how they reported to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children about children that were missing and turned up on Backpage ads. And there was internal memos that were being sent back and forth saying, we want to limit our number of reports to NCMEC this year. If we want to, I think there was one specific ad that said, we don't want to have more than 500 posts this month, so limit your NCMEC tips to 16 per month. They were limiting how many children that were being reported were being as missing and exploited were being reported so they could be rescued and found. And even more sinisterly, the moderators were actually trained at Backpage that if it wasn't a direct relative reporting that missing person, if it was a niece or a nephew or a grandchild, that wasn't important enough to report. That wasn't on the list of reporting, and they didn't do that. I think the exact quote was, nieces, nephews, grandchild, and cousins don't count. So it seemed that Backpage had taken so many extra steps to be complicit that the feds got involved. And if you go on the Backpage site now, you'll see that it's shut down by the federal government. And what happened when SESTA and FOSTA passed, and this was shortly before Backpage was shut down, a few days before, when that got passed, we noticed that Craigslist and all other websites of a similar nature that had some sort of online connection immediately took it down. So if you go on Craigslist now, and you'll see where you used to be able to meet people on Craigslist and do the advertisements, I'm looking for whatever it is you're looking for, that will now say that they've taken it down because of the FOSTA and SESTA legislation. And the FOSTA-SESTA legislation holds liable and accountable the individuals that run, operate, and maintain websites for the third-party content. It makes it illegal for them to facilitate a website that promotes prostitution. And what really made everybody in the United States stop operating in this capacity is it puts a reckless clause in there. If you're doing this recklessly, or one of those knew or should have known, you should have known this was going on. A reasonable person would understand this. Those individuals can also be held liable. So what this effectively did is the United States is no longer a country that tolerates selling prostitution ads online. And I know there's a lot of legal debate back and forth about this. On the one hand, there's an argument that it restricts free speech on the web.